I made a motion to accept the minutes.
Neil is entering the meeting.
Excellent.
I will second the approval of the meeting minutes if that has not been done.
I don't think it was. So Jerry makes a motion, Kirsten seconds. All those in favor of approving the minutes, give a thumbs up or say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
And is there anyone that opposed? All right, thank you. The minutes have been passed. Now, Neil, have you made it on?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, wonderful. Great. Thanks for going through all the twists and turns to get on tonight. Good.
It took me a minute, but I made it.
Yeah, good. Good for you. So, and hopefully Michael can get on. Like I say, he called me this afternoon and wanted to make sure about the meetings. So, but I know he likes to go to council chambers where somebody else messes with the technology and he doesn't have to do that. So, but hopefully he can find his way in. So what I'd like to do tonight, rather than just flip it back to Debbie, here's a suggestion I have for tonight. I'd like for us to take a few minutes to ask anybody, Debbie, Michael Foreman, another one of the committee members, any questions that you might have about the taxation issue and how we want to put that into the home rule charter. And then after we've had some time talking that through, I would like to have every member who's present on the committee tonight, I'd like to hear what they have to say with regarding to this, regarding the taxation issue. And once everybody has had a chance to speak, then we'll see, is there consensus building among us, or are we going to have to go back and kind of work through some more issues? So first is, any questions? You've been thinking about this. I know I've been thinking about this. Any questions that you?
Jerry sent out great information. About
I know, that was fantastic. Jerry sending that out, I agree. So I know there's been a lot of thinking about that, but does anybody have some questions that they'd like to throw out there before, you know, it would be your time to kind of come around and say, okay, this is what I think we ought to do. All right. Does that sound agreeable to people tonight?
Yes.
I'm going to take the absence of negatives as a positive. So, okay, so let's go ahead with that. So does anybody have any question you want to ask Michael Foreman or Debbie or any member of the committee, probably particularly Jerry, who's done a lot of work in getting the home rule charters? Does anybody have a question that they want to ask? Jerry, I have one then. In the charter, and I can't remember which town it is, there's a charter where the charter states that no, what is it? No, the income can't increase by more than 8%. Whatever taxation balance you do, you can't increase the revenue stream by more than 8%.
Yeah, there was two communities that worded it that way. there was one community that worded it to the effect that whatever you increase the earned income tax, you had to reduce the real estate tax, which just netted out to zero. So all they were doing was redistributing the income between the two sources. My opinion, the issue is revenue stream here in the city of Bureau Falls. So, that kind of proposal where one negates the other doesn't make any sense at all to me. I'm in favor of looking at 10% as based on revenue and not on rates. Because the rate, for example, I think in reading Debbie's sheet for talking purposes, she has increased earned income tax by 1%. And in fact, that doubles the income tax. Because it's 1% now. Debbie, if you're talking, I can't hear you. Can anybody hear me?
Sorry. You
Yeah, I
hear
can
me
hear-
now,
We can
right?
hear you, Jerry. Yeah.
All right.
Okay, sorry, I had it muted on my phone. I'm technologically challenged tonight. Now, I was going to put up where we left off, which might be helpful. So, where we left off was, what Jerry just said. In any fiscal year, no existing tax rate shall be increased by more than 2 mils for real estate, 1% for earned income, 1% for deed transfer. That's where we left off. One of the things I was thinking too, and Jerry, I think you ran into this in your review, you're going to have to exclude certain things because, for instance, debt service has to be excluded because if you take on debt, you have to levy enough taxes to cover your debt. So there might, even if you did something like this, you would have to have exclusions, I think, to make it practical.
May I make a suggestion?
Yes.
Do you want to have a discussion about whether or not you want limitations first? Because if the answer ultimately is you don't want any limitations, then discussing what limitations is kind of a waste of time. And then if you decide you want some limitations, move on to part B. I know what Debbie's opinion is. I can tell you mine is one of the reasons that you do a home rule charter is so you don't have these arbitrary limitations and you trust your elected officials to do what they need to do, because sometimes what's in the statutes is too limiting and the municipalities can't function. So I know it would be my opinion that you have no restrictions, because that's usually the main reason home rule charters are adopted. But I think you guys, that would be my suggestion, is that you kind of take a vote and make a decision on that issue first, and then you may not need to go any further.
I think we have a consensus that our concern is if we don't put some sort of limitations in, that this isn't going to pass. Looking at the events of the last election, I think that's a very real possibility.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And that's our concern right now. If we put at least something in, and hopefully it doesn't over restrict us, then that would probably be the best route to go.
Yeah, Bonnie, we had kind of gone back and forth about whether to have any sort of limitations last time. And it really does, I feel like we do have a pretty big consensus. And I know you guys don't like that, but knowing our context and knowing our political situation right now, there is zero chance of it passing without some
All
sort
right.
of.
Okay. Well, then I
Yeah.
apologize. I wasn't aware of that.
Oh, no, you're fine. You're fine.
And, but I would give yourself as much, pretty broad, because remember, the only way this is being changed is by another referendum, and it's pretty difficult.
And once you have restrictions, nobody's ever going to vote to take off those restrictions.
Well, okay, so let me ask, this is Kirsten. Let me ask, so if we put restrictions that are common sense in place, but and again, I recognize that everything can change in a heartbeat, but is there not, what is what is the worst thing that you've seen that could come from putting a restriction in this? That's my question, because I don't think, exactly like Bethany said, there's no way that this is going to pass in our current climate unless we have very, very, very clear limits. And I have a lot of concern about how we can get the message out about this, because there's a lot of negative misinformation and nobody wants to necessarily engage with what's actually happening. So regardless of what our actual powers are, it doesn't matter, because there's enough misinformation out there that would indicate that we could do whatever we want. So we need something here, and I don't know how we can set something up. I don't know. We need something in there.
I think I recognize exactly what you're saying, Kirsten. You asked for a worst case scenario, and I can give you actually a pretty recent one.
Good.
City of Farrell, last year they lost about half of their earned income tax because the one major employer they were on strike. The employees were on strike, and they thought they were going to move out. They ended up settling, but it took over a year to settle. So they lost about half of their revenue. If they had, and they are a home rule community, if they had caps, they would have had to, what they had to do was they raised taxes by 4 or 5 mills in 1 year. If they were not able to do that, they were going to have to lay off all their public safety people, because that was the only way to, have it within their budget. So those things hopefully will never happen, but it is a real possibility that you could lose a good portion of your revenue for whatever reason. I mean, nobody would have been able to predict a pandemic, and that you would lose revenue because of that. But your elected officials need to respond to those things, and hopefully won't have to do massive layoffs or things that would jeopardize the services that they provide, the really important services. So that's, I think, where, the positive pieces and the positive support for allowing the elected officials to have the flexibility to do what needs to be done, especially in an emergency or where there's a situation like that. So that's the downside. Having said that, as you know, Jerry did a lot of research and found that there are, a lot of home rule charters that do have at least some limits. So again, I'll turn it back to you guys, because I know Doug wanted to hear from all of you.
So can I ask one more question though? So what recourse does a city have in an emergency situation from the state in a situation like that? Where all of a sudden, there's a severe, budget shortfall that was completely unforeseen. Is there any support that exists outside of that, or is it just every city for him or herself?
Well, there's nothing that's guaranteed, but you could conceivably have state or federal government bailouts, as we did with COVID. But other than that, you would have to go into court and petition the court to allow you to increase your tax rate. In other words, you're asking the court for permission to violate your charter.
Sure.
And Debbie and Mike weigh in if I'm not remembering that correctly.
And can you tell me specifically in the city of Farrell how the charter, what was their charter said that they could not do what, and that they ended up having, or their charter did not say they couldn't do anything, right?
Right.
Okay.
Their charter has no limit on taxation, and so they were able to raise taxes to support their services, even though they had lost a significant part of their revenue source for that year.
Okay.
Can the issue of going to court be incorporated into the home rule charter, similar like the third class city code does on limitations on real estate tax?
In what context?
Well, if we put certain limitations in here, like we were talking about earlier, say just for talking purposes to 10%, and it turns out for whatever reason that that's not enough, can we then incorporate into the home rule that we're allowed to go to the court and petition them for more than what the home rule charter allows?
I have to double check and I'll grab my book while we're talking here. But I'm pretty sure that's in the home rule charter and optional plans law. Mike or Debbie, do you recall off the top of your heads?
I have not seen
I'll
that.
defer to Michael. Yeah.
I've
Okay,
not seen that.
I'll grab the statute while we're talking and I'll weigh in on that in a minute.
Good, thank you.
But I think Michael has some thoughts. Michael, have you seen that in a charter where there can petition the courts for additional millage?
No, I have not seen that in a home rule charter. What I have seen in a home rule charter is that instead of going to court, it's by referendum that the voters would say yes or no to increasing taxes, which in my sense is a non-starter.
Yeah,
Unless,
who's going to say yes to that? Right.
unless of
Right.
course it's dedicated to something very, very specific for a very short period of time, maybe within a year or two. It would all be part of the covenant or the ordinance that the governing body adopts to authorize the question to be on the ballot. But you still run the risk of voters not consenting to that, even for a temporary period of time. Another option that municipalities have that are not home rule is going into court when you have an unforeseen decline in revenues or an unanticipated increase in expenditures, and you ask the court for permission to authorize indebtedness under what's called an unfunded debt operating loan under a state statute known as the Local Government Unit Debt Act. And it's a three-step process. The first step is you identify what shortfalls you have or what crises occurred that you had unanticipated increases in expenditures or an unforeseen decline in revenue. Second step is you get a proposal from a bank that wants to lend you the money based upon that amount of money that you need to operate, because this is not a capital borrowing, it's an operating borrowing. It's an unfunded debt operating loan.
Isn't that,
Go ahead.
isn't that what the city's doing now?
No, we are
believe
doing
so.
a tax anticipation note. That's all we're doing. So we're getting our money earlier than we can collect it.
Right. A tax anticipation note is a temporary borrowing that needs to be paid back within the same year in which
That's
it's taken out.
Okay,
With the unfunded debt operating loan, you have up to 10 years to repay it. So once you get a proposal from a bank, the municipality adopts a series of an ordinance, and it goes to court to get approval, and then it goes to my legal department for a legal review and for approval to make sure it's not exceeding your debt limits. But I rarely have seen a home rule community go into court for an unfunded debt operating loan because they have the taxing flexibility to generate revenue from their on their own from their tax base. So, circling back to this issue about tax limitations and whether or not you put them in a charter, this is one of the most sensitive and controversial elements of a home rule charter. And I can see here that this is a very difficult issue and a very difficult decision that's going to be made. What you have to keep in mind is, again, the point that was made about taxing flexibility, and I hear loud and clear that the voters would not accept a charter without some limitations. Should you go down the road of limitations, you need to be fair, reasonable, and balanced within the context of you still have some taxing flexibility, but at the same time, there's still some cap or limit or process that you put in place to vet the potential for a tax increase. When I say vet, it can not only be the governing body making that decision, which of course they'd have to make, but public hearings and reaching out to the public before any decision is made. And of course, the majority of people are going to say, don't raise my taxes. And unfortunately, the ultimatum with, let me circle back another example. The city of Clairton, I worked with them for 27 years as a distressed municipality. And they had a home rule charter that was adopted in 1990 that tied their earned income tax rate and their real estate tax rate to, first, the earned income tax rate was tied to the rate cap under the current statute, Act 511, the Local Tax Enabling Act. They were also tied to the third class city code for millage for real estate. Segue out of Act 47 for Clairton was amending the home rule charter to lift the caps so that they could raise their earned income tax rate to 1% just for the city, to give them the taxing flexibility and the ability to finance their own service delivery system within their own means. So again, this is just perspective and context. I hear loud and clear that you want to put some limitations on. So
Okay, Michael Anderson, it's great to see you on board. Thanks
I
for
made
working.
it.
Yeah, good job. And we had a last minute snafu with Bethany, and so we changed the login at 5 to 7. So
Oh,
that's why I didn't tell you this afternoon when you called, hey, it's going to be different tonight or anything like that.
okay.
So what we're doing right now is we're just asking any questions that anybody has regarding the taxation issue. And then I want everyone in our group to have a couple minutes to say what they think we ought to do so that we can see, do we have consensus? The first thing we think we have consensus in is that even though I can understand the strong urging of Debbie and Michael and Bonnie about not putting limitations in, we all feel that's going to make this go down. So all of our work on writing a home rule charter would not be useful. So I think we're agreed that we need to put something in. So we're still in the question and answer time period. Does anybody have any other questions that they want to ask anybody about the taxation issue before we start going through and giving everybody an opportunity to speak?
Yeah, I have a question for Mike. Did you hear me?
Corman?
yes,
Yeah.
Michael Corman? Yeah.
Yeah, I was looking at Hermitage and St. Mary's, and they have in their home rule charters cannot impose real estate taxes greater than 25 mils. I don't know how old these home rule charters are, but it seems to me that they never hit that limit, and if they did, what did they do about it?
well, when that home rule charter was adopted, that was the general purpose millage cap for third class cities, 25
Right.
mils. But now, let me say two things about that. Number one was back then they could go to court and get up to 5 additional mills, showing
Third class city.
need and necessity. Now the third class city code was amended and reenacted about 5-6 years ago, where the millage rate for third class cities was increased to 30 mils,
Right.
where a third class city could go into court and get up to 5 additional mills to cap, to put it at 35 for general purposes. So in the context of St. Mary's, they're a growing community. They merged with Benzinger Township, which is probably one of the largest land masses within Pennsylvania of any municipality. so that they've got growth and development potential, that their tax base grows to the extent that I'm not, and I don't know what their millage is right now, but they're in a different scenario and a different situation than Beaver Falls is, because Beaver Falls is built out and has no room to grow or expand. But that's a
When
choice.
you
that-
say the same is true about Hermitage, because Hermitage is one of the fastest growing communities in southwestern PA. Hermitage has a lot of development and a lot of growth.
A lot of this is context. And that's what the drafters of the charter chose to do, to tie their tail to the third class city code. And St. Mary's, again, they're nowhere near Act 47. They may have gone through the early intervention program or the strategic management planning program. But I don't see them going into Act 47. I don't think Hermitage is either.
So if we put limitations on the tax structure like we're talking about, just to re-clarify, what are our options if that's not enough money, other than cutting expenses? Can we go to court? And if so, does it have to be in the charter?
I'm waiting for Bonnie to weigh in on that. I think she's checking these.
Yeah,
All right.
I'm looking at the statute. I mean, I'm gonna keep digging here, but at first blush, I'm not seeing it. So maybe my recollection is that I did that for a community that had it in its charter. So for right now, unless I find something more in the statute as I'm reading here, I would say let's put that provision in the charter to protect you.
To go to common pleas court for a judge to make that decision.
Yes.
Okay. Now, and you know, I'm not an attorney, Bonnie, Debbie, and Government Study Commission, but I would sense that there needs to be some criteria under which a judge would look at this and say, well, okay, you filed a petition with me, but I need to know where the beef is. Why are you coming to me as a judge asking to have me or not increase millage based upon what reasoning, what rationale, what justification?
You're exactly right, Mike. And you're not gonna find a judge that welcomes that petition on his bench. I can tell you that.
I would agree.
The question I have is, who makes that determination whether it's enough or not enough funding?
The budget.
The municipality, the manager, finance officer.
The city well, they don't have a finance officer.
Under home rule, I think it is proposed.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
That'd be a similar process to what's in the third class city code now, right?
Say that again, please.
I said that would be the same process as what's in the third class city code now if you want to exceed the real estates. It's the same process.
Right, up to 5 additional mills if you're capped at 30 mills right now for general purposes, correct. You
Right.
would go to court to get up to 5 more mills. And you need to show a judge a need and a necessity
All right.
for that increase, and you have to do it annually.
Right.
But I think what
And Michael and I both had to testify in those situations where you have to go in, you have to present the case to the court, you have to do it every year to justify exactly why you need that and why you can't, live within the revenue that you have.
Right. Well, we're making the assumption that there's some extraordinary event that happened, either in an expense side or the revenue side that will cause us to ask the court for that.
I just found an interesting provision in the charter law statute under taxing powers. It talks about the governing body shall not be subject to any limitation on the rates of taxation imposed upon residents. Now, it would be interesting to see if that has been interpreted to mean that all of these limitations that are in there are null and void.
or what you say, null and void.
I said it would be interesting to see if there's, I'll pull up another source with Westlaw and see if there's been any court interpretations to say that those provisions are null and void. As we all know, home rule charters often have provisions that are illegal.
I recall a case, Bonnie, out of Lackawanna County. It was a case regarding Lackawanna County where I think their home rule, and the court ruled that their limitations, I think, were not valid regarding real estate millage increases.
Okay.
I think their charter had limitations. And this, I think this could have been 20 years ago or so, prior century.
So I apologize for not having a more concrete answer, but this is proposing to me a little bit of a gray area here. Given that said, and I would like the opportunity to research that so you know what you're doing, because if I'm correct in this, that could be your answer to your residents, like we're not allowed to put limits in there. But let me keep looking, and I'll get into Westlaw and see. I don't know if you want to move on to another section or till we know for sure, or do you even care? Do you want to put limits in whether regardless of what the law says and let somebody deal with it down the road?
Yeah,
I'd
just
say
because we're not
49.
allowed to, then they'd be like, oh, we're not doing this at all. So,
Yeah, that's,
Yeah.
I mean, there's no way. And yeah, I don't see, if you say, oh, well, we're not allowed to, then that's the worst case scenario, in my
Okay.
opinion.
Okay.
We're dead in the water.
Okay.
Let me make another observation before we go on. I'm only going to take 20 seconds. These limitations that Jerry identified in home rule charters, this is just a gut feeling that, and rightly so, none of those were probably challenged in court. For a court to say, you know what, these rate caps really are not permissible. You know, so who would actually go into court and say, you know what, these rate caps, I want these rate caps lifted because I want to pay more taxes.
Right.
It's kind of a tongue-in-cheek,
Mhm.
non-legal interpretation of it, but I'll stop there.
Yeah, no, you're right, Michael.
Okay, let's say we're getting close to the time limit for asking questions. And I'm particularly interested in if people that haven't asked a question yet, if there's anybody out there that has a question before we start going around the circle to see what people think.
I do have a question. What would
That's
be
the spirit.
So I'm wondering, Jerry, earlier you were talking about preferring revenue limitations rather than rate limitations.
Right.
And I'm wondering, that seems to be a bit more logistically difficult or like hard to figure out and potentially harder to deal with. What would be the benefit to the revenue over the rate?
Well, if you're going to put a percentage on the rates, then, well, for example, what we have in there is the earned income tax can increase more than 1%, but 1% means you're doubling the earned income tax. So that's why I don't like using percentage on the rates, and the revenue would be more practical. I mean, it's not unreasonable to assume that your budget is not going to increase by more than, say, 10% from one year to the next, because typically, like labor contracts, which are probably comprised of about, I don't know, 60 or 70% of your budget, typically only going to increase like 2% or so.
Right.
So that's why I like revenues rather than rate, using percentage on rates.
Jerry,
Okay.
is that your burglar alarm going off?
Oh, and my dog, yeah. Yeah, he said that he's putting his 2 cents on in this conversation.
Yeah.
I'll be right back.
I heard him say no new taxes.
Read my lips.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He wants a cap on barking.
No caps on treats.
Hey, Doug Carson, are you out
Yes.
there?
Yep.
This is Michael. I have a
Yep.
quick question. I'm assuming what would be 8B, the highlighted area there on the form there.
Yes.
Was that the standard language, or was that something we formed and stuck in there?
No, we put that in there because, as you know, Debbie
Yeah.
and Michael have all been asked, making a good
Yeah.
case that we should have no limitations. So,
Yeah.
um,
The
we-
original
Yeah.
language was just that council, in its sole discretion, would determine the rate.
Yeah.
That
Okay.
was exactly the first sentence is there. That it stopped there. But
Okay.
in our discussion the last time, these things were kind of inserted.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, here's another question. Jerry, you're good with math. So I'm just trying to get a sense for, I think you have these numbers in your head. So if the limit is not raising the revenue by like 10%,
Right.
what would that translate to roughly? I know this is a guess, roughly to a rate. Like, is 10% like safe? Like, is that going to be safe for the city? But I mean, it seems like it would be safe. Like, why would your expenses go up more than 10% at one time, like you're saying? But what would that rate change look like? Would it be,
You're talking about millage?
No, I think I'm talking about more the percentage rates. The millage, I think we know like how much, you get a certain amount of income per millage in our current
Right. Well,
homeowner situation.
in rough terms, I'm just going by the 2019 audit because that's the last audited report that we have. And the general fund budget's around $6.8 million. And out of that, about, let's see, and between real estate and city earned income, it was like 2.3 million. So that's what, probably about 40% of the budget. So if we increase just say the real estate, the earned income tax, that'll probably generate at 2%. If everything increased by 2%, we'd need $148,000. So then you go back and look at where do you want to get that from, either the real estate or the earned income tax. We need the flexibility to be able to increase the earned income tax, and we don't have that now. That's
Sure.
one of the biggest problems we have.
So you think that is 10% a good number?
You get around, you get around 2 million in real estate and around 1 million, and this is in really round numbers, but you get about 1 million in Act 511 taxes.
Well, I didn't include Act 511 in my calculation.
Okay. Yeah, about 1 million. Well, yeah, you're right. About 650,000 in EIT and about 2 million in real estate.
Yeah, and I'm not looking at Act 205 at all.
Right. That's another, that goes into another.
So is is that 10%, is that not arbitrary enough to be helpful? Like, is that a helpful number? Like, we're not going to get ourselves into trouble?
No, I don't think so.
You think it's okay?
But that's why we're looking for caveats in case that's not enough. But
It's not.
I think for it to be more than 10%, I think there has to be an extraordinary event for that to happen.
Well, and as a taxpayer, coming at it from the taxpayer side, I feel like 10% is totally reasonable, right? Like, if taxes were
Right.
to increase 10% for, city services, I'm like, well, sure. But if it's like 50%, I'd be like, "Wah!" So,
They're gonna have that reaction at 10%.
well,
Well, we may,
true, but I feel like 10% doesn't seem like as much as like a not knowing that much about things taxpayer, but
Yeah, the thing we have to keep in mind is that I think we're all convinced that we have to show something in there just so that this thing passes. For us, all our work for last year is null and void.
right. So if we're all kind of agreed on that, we just have to make sure that what the limit is doesn't hurt us in the long run. And I think Jerry, you may have convinced me of that revenue thing, then that makes sense to me. And I value your insight into this because you're the one that deals with it all the time, right?
Right.
So that's important.
And like I say, that's why I was sort of digging at a caveat for, whether we need to go to court or how we go about that if 10% for some reason wouldn't be enough. I mean, right now I'm comfortable with that, but like I say, you never know. And then like Debbie cited the city of Farrell and what they went through. Well, that certainly was an extraordinary event.
Right. And that specifically, we don't have any employers right now that are big enough to make that much of a change, right?
Well,
Not-
but-
I You might eventually.
I mean, Geneva's not going to go on strike. So assuming, I mean, I can't imagine that would be the biggest. Is that the biggest employer, paid employer?
Yes.
So that particular instance at this present time does not seem like an issue.
I can tell you that from personal experience,
I know
things like that
I
are
know.
squash. So
Yep. I know. I know.
Sorry, Doug.
I know.
Yeah.
So just for an example, I just did the numbers. So that's about 3.5 mils. If we
10%.
assume that a mill is $50,000, it'd be about 3.5 mils that they would be allowed to. That would be the cap. If you did it all just on real estate millage.
Okay, so can you, Debbie, just so that I'm clear, so are you using the 6.8 million? You using 10% of that or what?
I was just using the real estate tax. So the current real estate tax is about 1.7 million, and then you get some delinquent taxes too. But if you were just talking about your current year real estate tax, you collect about 1.7 million. So that's 170,000 divided by 50,000 on a mill.
Okay, I got you. I know exactly how you did that. Okay, thanks. So what we would be saying is the 10% would be in that combination of earned income tax and real estate tax. That it would be based on the income from those two sources could not go up more than 10% because there are other revenue sources, but that's immaterial to what we're dealing with here.
Right.
Am I making sense? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right. The only other one that you could increase is the, as we have up here, the deed transfer.
Deed
tax.
transfer tax. Okay. So those three are the ones that the 10% increase would be based on. Yep.
here's another thing I just thought of. What if there's some other reason, like for example, maybe there's like something happens and we need to add more police officers, or we need to add more expense, a new park that needs to be taken care of, and it's going to require more budget that would put us over, you got your payroll increases, and then you also have this new project that needs to be funded. Like I guess that maybe would be capital, not operating, but are there instances where there might be some reason why your budget has to expand to fit that?
Yeah, but that's what I think. I think what we talked about tonight is if it's an emergency situation, then I think having that you go to court to get an increase that doesn't fit what your home rule charter says.
Yeah, I'm thinking not emergency though, like development,
I have an answer for you. I checked Westlaw.
Can I respond to Bethany first?
I'm sorry.
No, what you said is actually a really interesting comment, Bethany, because there are some expenses that are uncontrollable by anyone. For instance, healthcare costs often increase more than 10%. Workers' compensation costs, insurance liability costs. The municipality has practically no control over a lot of those costs that could very well exceed 10%.
Are those
Especially
in-
some years when healthcare went up 20%.
But that,
Those
that
are-
might not bring up the whole budget of the city that much, though. That brings up the
Right.
payroll.
Oh, that would bring up every personnel cost, which is 90% of the city's budget.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Bonnie. I had to finish my thought.
Oh,
A little
yeah.
chaotic.
No problem, and I apologize for kind of just barging in there. So I looked on Westlaw, and there's a case directly on point, and it went all the way up to the Supreme Court and was rejected by the Supreme Court that said that the Home Rule Charter had a provision that if they wanted to raise taxes over 5%, they had to do it by referendum. And somebody challenged that limitation, and the court said, no, you're not allowed to put a limitation on there, and the Supreme Court agreed. Well, the Supreme Court refused to take the case, which means they agreed. So, do with that information what you will. So what you could potentially, given that, let's say you decide you want to put a limit in here. What you could have the potential of is a future board, or, elected officials saying, well, we're being told that provision's illegal, so we're not going to abide by it. And, or, them, a taxpayer petitioning the court, or elected officials petitioning the court to declare that provision is illegal.
Let's determine if it's illegal, that means your rate increase is limitless.
I'm sorry, Jerry, I had trouble understanding what you said.
No, I said if we put a limit in and it's determined that's illegal, that means you can raise rates as much as you want.
That's exactly right.
Well, we're trying to put this in to get the thing passed.
Yeah. So I just wanted to make sure that, I'm giving you the correct information. Obviously, I understand your political restraints of, well, if we don't put something in there, it's not going to be passed. So, but I didn't want later on for somebody to tell you, well, that was illegal, and you say, well, why didn't Bonnie tell us?
Oh, yeah, no, that's fine.
Oh, excuse me.
I think these situations, we just have to cross the bridge when we get there.
Okay, we've gone almost an hour on asking questions. I think I sense that a number of us are kind of leaning in particular ways. But even now, there are people I'm real interested in hearing from. So unless you overrule me, I would like to move now to having people state what they would like us to say with regard to taxation. Okay, I'll start by saying I'll take volunteers, but I'm going to keep track here of who has and who hasn't spoken. And if you don't volunteer, eventually the teacher's going to come around and volunteer you. So, but I'll start with volunteers, people that want to state what their taxation idea would be.
I'll volunteer. My idea is that, and this isn't the exact wording, but something to this effect, that the combination of real estate tax revenue and earned income tax revenue cannot exceed more than 10% in one fiscal year.
I'm wondering, I think I would, maybe this is too complicated, but would it be possible to say your earned income tax and your deed transfer tax, you couldn't raise your revenue more than 10%, but the real estate tax could be based on mills, so you would have like a rate and a revenue thing that were separate, so you had a little protection. Is that too complicated, Jerry? You're making a face.
Well, yeah, I didn't know you could see me. Yeah, the only reason I don't like that is we're going to have a reassessment here in a couple of years. And,
It's already going on.
well, yeah, but I mean, officially, we're not going to be taxed on it for a year or two. So, you know, in effect, if the assessed value doubles, then our real estate tax is going to be cut in half. Another reason why I like the revenue is that 10%, it doesn't all have to be 10% real estate and 10% income tax. We could actually reduce the real estate tax and increase the earned income tax by a larger percentage as long as the total of the two is not more than 10%.
Right. That's nice and flexible
Yeah.
and fair.
I mean, that's a decision that the council have to make, but that gives you that flexibility. It doesn't all have to be 10% on each one. It could be 10% in total.
Thank you, Jerry. Next volunteer.
I'll go, Doug. Do you hear me?
Yes. Yeah, go for it. Is this Neil?
No, it's Michael.
Oh, Michael. Okay, Michael.
I'm going to be very simple, and I think I agree with how the wording that Jerry did or said, and with the 10%. But I also like the wording that's there now, with the 2 mills and then 1% and 1%. So that's the way I would lean. All right.
Thanks, Michael. Next volunteer.
I'll go. This is Neil.
This is Neil. I got you
There's
now.
I also agree with Jerry with the 10% on all three of the things that we can tax. I also kind of like the idea that Bethany had with the flexibility, but I know that's probably complicated, and I don't really understand how it would work at this minute. So, but I agree with Jerry on the 10% each year.
Here's another question. Do you know
Bethany,
like,
but the time for questions.
sorry, it's important. This is an operational question. Do you know if your healthcare costs are going to go up, your payroll costs are going to go up before you are passing your tax revenue budget stuff?
Well, you should, because typically in, say, around November or something, you're getting quotes and bids. So, and whatever the best deal is, that's what you're going to incorporate. That's what you're going to incorporate in your. Go ahead.
Yes. No, Jerry's right. You usually, in November, December, you get your increases for all your employees and your retirees usually, because you usually have retirees. And then you plug those all in the budget. And that helps you to understand how much revenue you need to generate.
Yep.
Yeah, typically, you pass the budget and the tax rates at the same meeting, at the same time.
Okay. Yeah, I'm
Bethany,
like
you've
nervous.
got the floor. Why don't you keep going?
Yeah. So I definitely want to incorporate this revenue thing. Seems like the most sensible thing for us. I am nervous about the number, as if you think 10% is enough, but I do know that, healthcare costs and things, payroll can go up more than 10%. But also you can get, I don't know, if you all think that 10% is a good number, then fine. I'm happy also with like a 12 or something that is safer, if you feel like it's risky, because again, it's not, we're never going to be able to change it. So, if the limitation is not going to hamper efforts, then 10% is fine with me.
Okay, Kirsten's volunteering.
Oh yeah, totally. I'm so glad you asked. No, so I mean, I'm in line with everyone else. I personally, I would not vote, even with the limited understanding that we currently have. I feel like I would not feel comfortable voting for something that did not have some sort of, at least, you know, like a throw in an homage to the fact that like we are saying we're not going to do this. I'm fine with the fact that somebody might come in and say this is illegal and we have to do it anyway. I would rather have that happen than be the one that's saying, oh, we have no limits and we can do whatever we want. So I'm very comfortable with the idea of the 10 or the 12 or the 15% limitation. I do not believe it will pass at all without that. And I don't know that I would vote for it either, just based on the limited knowledge that I would have without being part of this committee. So that's where I'm willing to stay. And I think that would be an attractive talking point to somebody that is not sure how they feel about it. And I think that the benefits of passing the charter far outweigh the detriments that could come from this supposed limitation.
Okay, good. I'm with everybody else, except I do not want to get into millage and saying we're gonna, so many mills or whatever. I don't want to put a cap there. In fact, I think one of the things that I'm most interested in with home rule charter is kind of shifting that revenue stream more towards the earned income and away from what I think is a more regressive form and really has limitations for a depressed steel town that is pretty much built out, as we've said. I don't think millage is going to give you the income stream you need for city services. So I would be in favor of language like Jerry's for 10%. I, like everyone else, if we don't put that in, what people are going to hear is they can raise my taxes as high as they want. There's no limitation. And that will kill the home rule charter. So I would like to go 10% with nothing on millage. So in my opinion, other than the millage issue, we are pretty much in consensus. So let me give people just a couple minutes to comment on that. Is there any disagreement that we have a pretty clear consensus here? Does anybody want to push on the millage idea and say, no, we have to get some kind of cap on that?
No, I think it makes sense to have it as a combination, so you can like leverage one over the other. Yeah, I'm going back on what I said earlier.
Okay, I tried to do a sentence here that tell me if this expresses what the consensus is. It says in any fiscal year, the revenue derived from a combination of real estate taxes, earned income taxes, and deed transfer tax shall not exceed 10% over the previous year.
I like that.
Yes, I like that.
Yes.
Yes,
Yep. Nicely done, Debbie.
yes, absolutely.
I was taking notes. You guys did it. I was just taking notes. Michael Foreman, you're the wordsmith. Does that make sense to you?
True.
Nice. Okay, so that's great. I feel really good about this. We're all on the same page. Neil, are you okay with nothing on the millage?
Yes, I'm good with that.
Okay, good. I wanted to make sure because you were kind of going down Bethany's track too. So thanks.
No problem.
Okay. Now let me say that our original plan, which is a great one, which is to invite the two incoming potential new council members and the potential new mayor. And the reason I'm saying potential is there's a primary, it's not a done deal until you have the general election, but we're so heavily Democratic, the Democratic winners are in all likelihood in. So inviting those 3 new folks into our meeting so we can explain to them what we've done. And we wouldn't start with taxation. We'd start with the new organization of things, but review all that and kind of bring them up to speed. The plan was that we would do that on the 17th. I'm a little nervous with Regina not being here. But I hate to keep pushing it off, down. If we don't do it on the 17th, then we'd either have to call additional special meeting in July, which we could do, or kick it into our regular meeting in August. Can I hear a little bit of feedback on that?
I have some. We want to make sure that we're still on, because we've taken a lot of time on this issue, rightly so, but we need to make sure we stay on our timeline and get our charter out in time, which is in July, right? July or August, we need to get it out. So we could meet with them towards the end of that when we're feeling farther along.
I think the sooner, this is Michael, and excuse me for disagreeing, but the sooner we get them in, I think the better off we'll be.
I agree
I agree with
completely,
that too.
Michael.
Yeah.
I think we need to have open and honest conversation, because if we're not going to have, if there's no cooperation or no buy-in there, then that's also going to be a strong signal that this will not fly.
Yeah.
So I think that those conversations are incredibly valuable. And again, it's at this point, we don't know for sure, but again, like my dad said, with the primary, but like the voters have spoken, and it seems like this is the direction that they would like to take the city. And so we need to make sure that we're not representing a microcosm of, the city, and rather that we are, we're working on a level playing field with the, supposed incumbents. So I think we, the sooner the better. I think we're already too late in some ways, but.
Is Regina the only one that's missing tonight, right?
Yes.
Doug, why don't you talk to her, let her know what we have done, but then go ahead and have the meeting next Thursday.
Okay. How about
An alternative might be, I'm just throwing it out there. Next week, because it's only a week away, we finish the budget and finance section, because we have a few more sections here. Regina should be here, get that on board. You have a meeting on July 1st. That would give you some time to get them invited and give them some time, advance warning that you have another meeting on July 1st.
I have no problem with that.
I agree with that.
We do have a few more things under finance to talk about.
All right.
Okay. I'm going to be away July 1st, but
Do you think
Zoom.
Yeah, as long as we Zoom, it's family vacation, so it's both Doug and myself. And so, but I'm more than happy to be a participant in something that's that vital on vacation. I have no problem with that.
Yeah, I'll also be away, but I can Zoom in as well. I will be on a different vacation than them.
Yeah.
Well, maybe
your
that's a
family,
bad date.
Bethany.
Well,
maybe that's a bad date for everyone. That is a holiday weekend. You're right.
well, we also have a new grandchild coming in that general time period. So if that happens, I will not be here.
Well, see, so this kind of begs the question, and I don't think I think, honestly, I think the sooner the better that we reach out. And
Yes.
I don't think we have to have all the answers before we reach out.
No.
Yeah.
Because I think that we want
Okay.
this to be a cooperative and a collaborative effort. And again, there's no reason for either one of us to have to be interested or wedded to what the other party says. But I think that just strengthens up the idea that we need to reach before anything else.
Okay, let's go ahead and let's plan on inviting our 3 incoming on the 17th. Neil, I think, is my memory right that you were willing to do the inviting?
That's correct. Yeah, I'll do it.
Thank you. Great.
And no,
And let's plan on, all other things being equal, trying to get as many people to meet in person in council chambers.
Yep.
If we have to do Zoom in addition to that, that's okay. But this meeting will be better if we are doing face to face.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, and Debbie, we hear you. We'll clean up the nuts and bolts stuff that we have left undone. But let's we can work on that in time, I think, and keep going. But thanks to everybody for urging that forward. So that'll be the plan. At the next meeting, we'll kind of do a review for the incoming political folks. Okay.
Doug, does Paula
Yeah.
have to advertise? Does Paula have to advertise that meeting?
No, I mean, it's no different than, it's our meeting. It's not a council meeting. Our meetings are open to the public. Anybody can come to that meeting.
Okay.
It was a regular scheduled meeting anyhow. Tonight's one.
Tonight's wasn't, right?
Right.
Right. So
Okay,
I have one more question.
Yeah,
I have one more question though before we adjourn here, because I want to start working on the next section. And I had planned that the next section would actually deal with the city's boards and commissions. And when I say that, when I reviewed a lot of the home rule charters, there is a section that sets up some standard committees. And I guess my question is, and maybe Doug and Jerry can answer this, are there standing committees or commissions that need to be addressed in the charter? Not committees like civil service, that's under the civil service law, zoning and board and planning commission, those are under the MPC. But are there things like, the things I was seeing were things like personnel boards, recreation boards, things like that, library boards. Those were things that I was seeing in some of the charters that you may or may not want to include, because I can begin to work on that section if I get some feedback from you.
Debbie,
Can-
can we
can
talk
that be
a little?
administrative?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So can that be done in the administrative code?
Yes.
that would be my suggestion as well.
So not have a section like that at all, just
That's correct.
do it in the admin code. Is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Sure.
sounds good. Then if I delete that section, the next one would be on citizen participation, so I'll begin to work on that one. And then we're
Thank you.
actually close to being done.
All right.
Good news.
Done. What's done?
No, then we
with the
then we
first
have
draft.
the biggest job of all.
Yeah, I was gonna say done with part. Yeah.
Our gigantic
easiest
work
part.
hasn't even started. Yeah.
Mm-mm.
So,
Mhm.
okay.
That's right.
Okay. Great work, everybody, and we're gonna wrap up before an hour and a half, so that's good. Good job, everybody. And thanks again, Debbie, for on very short notice getting the meeting set up. That was-
No problem.
Yes, thank you. Are we gonna have, are you gonna do a motion for closing?
Are you gonna say that motion?
I'm writing down the motion. Sure, adjourn, move to adjourn.
Okay, who's second?
I do.
Who-
Okay.
Was that Michael or Neil?
That was Michael.
Michael, okay.
Do we sound alike, Mike? We must sound alike.
Apparently we do.
For some reason, you do.
You do, and I
so
can't
bizarre
see
on
you.
the phone, but I
Yeah.
can't. Yeah, that's it's only
Michael,
on
you
the
keep
phone.
showing us your ceiling, and I can't figure out who
Oh.
it is.
Oh, there I am.
Hi.
There you are. That's
Oh.
Michael.
Oh, I was looking at that, and I'm thinking, Doug, that I'm looking at your
We're
ceiling.
different.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there's
Hi, Neil.
Hey, hi.
Hey, there's Neil too. All right. Okay.
All right, thank you.
All those in favor of adjourning, say aye or give a thumbs up or something like that.
Aye.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Debbie.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Michael
Doug.
Foreman. Thanks, Bonnie. Yep.
Good job, Doug.
Good